I'm Lynn Martell with Loma University Medical Center and Journey of Hope. Want to welcome you to another edition of our program here. It's a program where we interview former patients, people that have been impacted by the healing ministry of Loma University Medical Center. We have people coming from around the world, people that have experienced some type of a medical tragedy, or a trauma, or cancer. Our patient today is Michael Long, a cancer survivor, an energetic father of two, involved in a very interesting business. And I want to welcome you to our program here, Michael.
And thank you.
Michael's
it's great to be
from
here.
Ashburn, Virginia. And Michael, I want to learn a little bit about your background. We have people from around the world that are watching on satellite, and I know you have something to do with satellites. But before we talk about that, tell us where you're from, a little bit about your background.
Where I'm from, my father was in the Army. My mother was a naturalized U.S. citizen, German. I was born in France and grew up in Germany until I was 10.
So you've been traveling around from very early on then.
Yeah, in fact, as my father got posted around, we traveled there while he was doing his tours in Southeast Asia. I lived in Germany on the economy. So I'd go and I'd be an American kid in the morning and a German kid in the afternoon. And that was truly a great experience.
So did you learn another language then?
I do. I speak German.
You speak German, okay.
I speak a little bit of French too.
All right, and then you ended up coming here to the United States. And where were you raised here in the United States?
Yeah, my father was assigned to Fort Lee in Petersburg, Virginia. And I went to high school there. Went to Catholic high school and went on to the University of Virginia, where I graduated with a degree in economics and German.
And okay, so at that point, what was your plan in life? What did you want to do when you took economics and German?
Well, the economics and German was actually something I decided to do after I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a chemistry lab.
Okay.
So economics seemed like a very good and broad-based application. And as I started to study it, I became more and more interested in it. And it seemed like a great foundation to do so many different things, and I ended up completing a double major my last 2 years there in economics and German, and then I went and decided to go into the area of contracting, and went to work for the U.S. government as an intern in St. Louis, Missouri. Ended up in St. Louis for a year and a half. Buying parts for UH-60 helicopters, supporting the Rapid Deployment Force. In fact, the helicopter that shot up that speedboat that was lying mines in the Persian Gulf was one of mine.
Oh, was it really?
It was. So then I went on to work on the Pershing II missile program in Huntsville, Alabama. And from there I went up to the Office of Naval Research. From there I made the leap into private industry, and I worked for a company called E-Systems for a few years. And then a woman came into my office that I knew from work who said, Michael, I think you need to go look elsewhere. Give me your resume. She gave it to her husband, Brian, who was a vice president with a company called Orbital Sciences Corporation. Next thing you know, I'm working in the space industry, and that's pretty much where I've been since that time.
So now, and then what are you doing now? I mean, you're launching something.
Well, yeah, what we do right now is we actually launch commercial communication satellites on a Russian rocket called the Proton, which is a name which has a certain resonance with you.
Called the Proton.
That's right. And we launched that from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where Yuri Gagarin went into space.
And I mean, you're doing this on a continual basis, or?
Yep, I work on the business side. I work with a great group of people at ILS, and who've been
ILS. Now that's
International Launch Services.
Okay.
That's the company I work for. A great group of people who were very supportive of me when I was here at Loma Linda, and in fact, they ended up asking me constantly for updates. They also kind of noted the irony, if you want to call it, that there were protons being shot into my head, and they wanted to make sure they were small ones, not the big ones that I use. And from that perspective, it was really great to have that link. In fact, we have a picture of the Proton rocket hanging in the fixed beam room.
Do you really?
At Loma Linda. And somewhere in all that process, I also completed my master's in business from George Mason University. And now I work, and what we do is we propose and negotiate and sell launch services to launch these satellites for customers around the world. Not 10 days ago, I was in Taiwan. Earlier in the year, I was in Dubai. And it's a great opportunity to get some chances to see some of the finer conference rooms around the world.
I imagine you're traveling all around the world. Well, Michael, several years ago, I think it's about 5 now, you made a sobering discovery. Why don't you tell us what happened?
I did. In fact, it's what I'll call round 1. After 3 successive trips to India, my father being diagnosed with cancer, I was traveling back and forth to Texas.
What type of cancer did he have?
He had lung cancer, a very aggressive form of small cell carcinoma tied to Agent Orange.
And I imagine he went rather quickly.
He did, 2.5 months.
Okay.
And it was really very difficult to see.
I imagine it was. So you had this kind of a family background then.
I did, and of course all this was on top of my regular work, traveling about places in the world and doing things of that nature. So needless to say, I was a little tired. And in fact, as I continued to press on, I kept looking forward to this one special week that I spend at the Outer Banks of North Carolina every summer. And I just knew that if I could make it to that week, then I would be able to rest and get a little bit better.
So you were getting tired and exhausted, and it was more than just being tired from traveling, but you didn't know it at that point.
That's true. And I've always been a very physically
fatigue.
I've always been a very physically strong person, and I was able to just will my way through it and push my way through it and use my physical strength. And that ended up being a disservice to me. I then...
you ignored certain things.
Yeah, I overlooked them because I attributed them to all these other things that were going on, which in retrospect I would probably have come to the same conclusion, but my physical strength did not serve me well in this case. And
you just kind of kept pushing yourself.
I did. And then lo and behold,
ignoring signs and denying that it's more than what it really is.
That's right. And I went to the Outer Banks for a week.
Which is down in Carolina.
And that's right. It's on one of the beaches in North Carolina. And didn't feel the slightest bit rested after that week. Then I went on a 13-day trip to Tokyo and Seoul, which just absolutely devastated me. And
totally depleted any energy that you might have had.
Did not know how I would find my way up the stairs when I arrived home from that trip. So needless to say, I thought it was appropriate to go and go see a physician, which I did. Everything appeared to be normal. Blood pressure was good, breathing rate, EKG, you name it. And they drew blood. Well, the next day I was on I left the following evening for a trip to Toulouse, France. And somewhere I was en route, they got the blood report and found out that I was very anemic. So the orders came out, and I was immediately told to come around and come home. And I was ordered to go directly to the emergency room upon my arrival at Washington Dulles International Airport.
So you were on your way to France. How did you find this out?
By walking into the hotel room, and the phone was ringing without anybody really knowing I was there. And I was told that, although it's uncertain why I needed to do so, I had to call home immediately. That would be in bold font, underlined.
So this must have been quite a surprise. You're walking into a hotel, and they don't even know nobody knows you're there. You walk in, and the phone is ringing.
That's right.
And you get the message, you've got to call.
Not only do I have to call, but they also, my doctor also wanted to know if I was near a hospital. Of course, and that just kind of raises the curiosity level just a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was pretty clear that I was bleeding internally. Of course, the cause was unknown, but I was over 20% low on blood volume in my body.
Already?
And in fact, my physician said that I really should be unconscious at this point. But again, my physical strength enabled me to push through that. And ultimately, that's what was causing my, tremendous amount of fatigue.
You've been bleeding for a period of time, and the blood count was going down.
And so
you're in France, so you turn around then and...
Turn around. Get in a cab, go to the airport the next morning, stopping along the way, of course, to grab a couple of croissants because you can't go to France without eating some croissants. And came home, straight to the emergency room, transfusion, Had a colonoscopy in which we discovered I had a tumor in my colon, which led to surgery. Had a resection. The tumor had grown outside the actual colon wall. It had grown to 2 of the lymph nodes, and that led to chemotherapy for 6 months. And I ended up having the 5FU protocol, and been following up ever since that time. And I thought I had dodged my bullet at that point.
So this was 5 years ago, and
Right.
and you kind of overcame it. And when you're hit with the words you got cancer, it's a kind of a terrifying experience.
My first thought was, dear God, how can this happen? I haven't taught the girls everything I need to teach them yet.
And kind of the fear that you might be leaving before
Before my work is done.
Before
yes.
your work is done. I think that's true for nearly everyone when they get the words, and all of a sudden mortality, they're faced with their own mortality and hear the clock ticking. So you went through the chemo and you dodged the bullet.
I did.
And
with some great medical care. Dr. Rangappa Rajendra, his team of nurses, absolutely fantastic. Had a fantastic surgeon, Russell McDowell. Cannot thank them enough. Absolutely top flight people in the medical field.
And you went through how many months of chemo?
6 months.
About 6
So finished that in May of 2004.
Okay, and you've overcome. You're going to be able to continue working with your daughters and
Absolutely.
and training them and mentoring them and watching them grow up. And then what happened?
Well, the chemotherapy really took a little bit out of me, so my stamina was rather weak.
You didn't recover as quickly as you thought you were going to.
No, let's say not as fast as I had hoped I would. And as my energy started to come back, I started to play a little bit of soccer part-time in the fall. And then the following spring, I joined and knew that I would go ahead and play full-time as a goalkeeper on my soccer team. Go Leesburg Fire.
This is back in the D.C. area.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Played with a great bunch of individuals there. Very international team, energetic team, really wonderful people. And it really was a joy. We played matches on Sunday, and it's something that you just can't wait to. It's something to look forward to every week.
So life is it's finally going better for you.
It is, and then we have a match on the 2nd of July, 2006. And I wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off, and I'm seeing double. And I think I'm not quite awake. I even went into the bathroom and put my head under the faucet in the bathtub and had cold water run over my head. And that didn't take care of it either. So needless to say, I was a little bit curious. I knew that there was something that was going to require some attention. But I got dressed, went and played a match. We won.
Good.
And, but made a note that as soon as the doctor's office is open in the morning, they're getting a phone call from me. No more putting things off like I did before. And my primary care physician, at this point it's Dr. Holger Noelle, German doctor. He goes, looks at me, can't figure out anything that's going wrong, sends me upstairs to see an ophthalmologist. Can't find anything wrong. That was on Monday the 3rd. Tuesday was the 4th. And isn't it amazing how these things always happen?
You remember these dates.
How you remember these dates and the exact times, and they're embedded in your memory in a way that few things truly are. And so then I went to see a retina specialist on Wednesday. They couldn't ascertain any problem, and they suggested that I perhaps see a neuro-ophthalmologist. At this point, I took a step back and decided that there was an assumption being made that it was related to my eye, that I was not comfortable with. So I went and started to locate a neurosurgeon. And I wanted to see a neurosurgeon that day. And as you well know, that's usually pretty hard to do. So I let my fingers do the walking, so to speak, and found a neurosurgeon just an hour from my house. It was Thursday afternoon. He saw me late after office hours. He was sufficiently concerned that he had somebody bumped from an MRI scheduled the following morning and put me in their place. And I was told to bring the films over with a wet reading, and I did so. And ultimately then at 5:15 in the afternoon on Friday, I found out I had a tumor in my head.
You had a second type of cancer.
Yes.
And what was it finally diagnosed as?
Well, we didn't get the diagnosis for quite some time because of its location. its location was very problematic. It was in what's known as the pons, tucked in between the pituitary gland and the carotid artery.
Difficult to reach.
Virtually impossible, yes. In fact, you could not even do a biopsy because the risk was so great. So since I knew such excellent physicians, I went to go see my oncologist, made sure I was there a half an hour before he opened up the office, sat down on the floor outside the office and waited for him. Told him what was going on. He thought for a few seconds and said, "This is who you need to go see." And then I went to go see that doctor the following day, and that was July 12th, I think it was. And
They came
I think
up
July 11th.
July 11, 12.
And then I remember what he said to me. He looks at the x-rays and he says, "Boy, Rod sends me all the tough ones, doesn't he?" And he said, "I don't know if we can get to this." And I walked up to the x-rays and said, "Well, can't we go in through the nasal cavity and drill through that bone right there and get to it that way?" He says, "No, we can't do that. That's too hard." And you'll hear about that again in just a second. But anyway, he told me that 80% of the brain we can get to rather easily, 10% with substantial morbidity, and 10% we can't get to. And he didn't know which of the two 10% I was in. That was a bad day. That was a very bad day. So I called my boss, told him I wouldn't be in for the rest of the day, and went home and cried like a baby. And then I pulled myself together, because he had also said, "But we haven't lost hope. There's a new doctor who just moved down here. I heard he's great in this area." So Chandra Brawley carried my films around with him, got a hold of Joe Watson, told him what the deal was, and Joe felt he could get to it. Joe calls me Thursday afternoon, says, "Hi, this is Joe Watson. Chandra Brawley spoke to me. Maybe you can come in so we can talk." And within 5 minutes of my meeting Joe Watson, I knew I was going to be okay.
You had a sense that there was, it wasn't the end.
True. Well, I had been through a dark tunnel already.
Sure.
And the biggest concern was if nothing could be done, because at that point the end game was fairly well cast in stone. And but Joe, I just felt so reassured.
Gave you some hope.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And then it was a matter of going through the surgery, which I did the following Wednesday, as soon as space opened up. And sure enough, and he tells me he's going in through my nasal cavity, cutting open the sinus, and drilling through the clivus bone.
The very thing that you had kind of suggested.
Right.
So then you had the surgery. When did you come to Loma Linda?
Well, first of all, I had to wait for the pathology. One day goes by, 2, 3, 4, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. After 37 days, we were finally able to get a pathology of this thing. And that was done by the chief of pathology at Johns Hopkins. And it was called a chondrosarcoma, a tumor which is normally found on the long bones and is very rare, and is even more rare to have in the head.
Is that right?
And so completely unrelated to my prior cancer. And Joe says again, "Why don't you come in so we can talk about alternatives?" And I go and I talk to him, and he says, "You're probably going to need some kind of radiation." We couldn't get all the tumor, of course, because some of it was tucked behind the carotid. And you probably want to look into some kind of radiation. Maybe you might be a good candidate for proton radiation. And I remember him saying, "I know they do that at Loma Linda and maybe some other places." So I go home and start researching on the internet and start finding out about proton, about what it means, what it is. I read a paper written by Dr. Slater, talks about the effectivity of proton, particularly with my type of diagnosis, its effectivity. I was really taken by the fact that it greatly reduced side effects, the fact that the beam does not traverse the entire body at that point and stops effectively at the tumor, depositing its energy right there.
Destroying the tumor.
That's right. You can deposit more energy there. You don't affect the portion of the body because you're only on the entry side. There's no exit path for the radiation, or unlike other treatment modalities. And it was at that point I was hooked. Okay, proton, that's it. So the next question is where to go. And I started looking up. Loma Linda was, I read about it, treated 1/4 of the world's totals. Thought, well, that's pretty impressive. I also knew they had it at Mass General and University of Indiana, but I couldn't learn enough about them in such a short time, and I wasn't really inspired by what I found. And MD Anderson, one of the greatest cancer treatment facilities in the world, but they had just come online. And I remember, I think I told my brother, I said, I don't go to a restaurant right when it opens, and I don't think I would trust this. Not that they don't do a great job,
Sure.
and I know they do.
Yeah, but they were just getting started, and you didn't want to be one of the early patients.
Absolutely. I try to avoid being the guinea pig whenever possible. And, but fundamentally, it really came back to the fact that Loma Linda had treated so many patients that the man who is ultimately responsible for proton therapy in a clinical setting is right here.
Right.
And,
that's where it all started, right here.
That's right. And so it really was a no-brainer. And so I called and ended up getting on the schedule, flew out here. And once I flew out here, any doubts that I had were immediately allayed because I went down to the first level and I just started meeting people down there. And you're thinking that something's wrong here. There's too many happy people here. And it really is infectious when you're down there. People were so positive. The staff was just unbelievable. And so reassuring, so confident, so friendly.
We have an undergirding philosophy to make man whole.
Absolutely.
Mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. We're going to take a look at a couple of pictures, and you can kind of guide us through here, and then we're going to come back and talk about how this cancer made an impact upon you. Well, what's our first, you kind of talk about this.
It's my daughter, Mackenzie. She was 11 years old when we took that picture. She's 12 now, and that is her beaming personality coming through right there. And she was of great support to me, and she is. I can lean on her, and she is just a fantastic human being, as well as a great student, great swimmer. This is my other daughter, Alexandra, 2 years younger. Brilliant girl, also a wonderful human being, soccer player. Great student, is going to be representing her school, hopefully, in the spelling bee.
Really? You told me about one of your daughters was recently appointed to be an ambassador.
Yeah, that's Mackenzie, the one that's on the left in this picture. Mackenzie is a very strong girl physically. She used to take pride when she was younger that she was the only person who could pick up everybody in her class. Not at all at the same time, of course, but she is very, very physically strong. Well, there's some people that were getting into a fight at school, and she stepped in between them and broke it up. And teacher saw that, and they decided to make her some type of goodwill ambassador. And Mackenzie only told me about this after the fact, like, oh, Dad, I got a new, pencil or something like that. Okay, and this is me as we're getting ready to do some of the dirty work on me, so to speak. That's Sean there, one of the technicians, and I took my camera down there one day and said, you guys need to maybe take a few pictures of this so we can capture this for posterity. And so what we did is you see me there on the table right in front of the fixed beam, and that mask is designed to keep my head in exactly the same location every time we go and get a treatment done. And that thing fits very tightly over the face. It's custom made. But that way, if you know exactly where the head is, they can go and send the beam in, which can be conformed to the shape of the tumor and deliver all that energy right to the tumor. This is just another angle of that. You'll see how I'm laying there. And then the beam is coming right through that blue block that you see. My daughters again. And my girlfriend, Kelly. Kelly has had breast cancer, so we have a lot in common.
All right, well, let's talk about how this cancer, in the last couple of minutes we have, what difference has this made to you? Having cancer, how has it made a difference in your life?
Well, some people, and I think only cancer patients probably understand this, but cancer can be one of the best things that's ever happened to you in your life. I know it was in mine. I think I was a pretty easygoing person before, but it even further helped recalibrate and help me refocus on those things in life that truly are important. It also enables me to go and speak in a meaningful way to help other people who have cancer. And there is absolutely nothing better than helping another human being on something that matters to such a great degree. And that really is rewarding. You cannot place a monetary value on the feeling you get from doing so.
What was the difference in having the cancer the second time?
The first time, I think, threw me a bit harder because I had not been down that road before. And I think I had a great deal more fear as a result. The second time, once I knew that there could be an attempt to retrieve the tumor, I had absolutely no doubt that I was going to come out the other end okay, and that I knew I would have to go through a long tunnel to get to where I needed to be. I knew I would have high points and low points, but there was no doubt I would come out to be just fine. In fact, I did come out fine. I have recovered from the treatment that I had. I play soccer again. And,
in fact, what happened to your finger? I know they can't see you.
Playing for the Leesburg Fire. We play in a league with a lot of ex-college players, and ball coming in rather hard, had a parry, and did myself a little injury, jammed 2 fingers, and in this case I dislocated the distal joint and had a little tearing of the ligaments and the musculature. And my doctor was acting, and I guess she was trying to call me that, oh, this is terrible, but we can fix this.
So there is life after cancer.
My response to her was, oh, this is nothing. This is like a mosquito bite. If you knew what I've been through, this is nothing. So it really helps calibrate you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm grateful for what I've been able to go through. And I'm grateful for being able to help other people. And, I mean, think of what this means. You're faced with that kind of adversity in your life. No, you can find your way through.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for being with us here on Journey of Hope. There are people from all around the world that are watching, and I know that your story has been an encouragement to them. For Loma Linda University Medical Center and Journey of Hope, I'm Lynn Martell. For those of you that are watching, we want to encourage you to tune in next week as we interview another patient that's been impacted here at Loma Linda.